All right. I did a real quick rundown on this, but this is basically my first ride on video of the YZ250 SM. I got a set of Warp 9s during their deal that they do for Black Friday sale, and I got a set of 17s for it. And I'm trying to kind of get a little bit of a feel for this thing, even though it's very difficult to do that when it's 40, maybe 44 degrees out here. I'm gonna go ahead and take a look at it over here so you can see what all I've got. You won't be able to see everything that I've done here. Okay, the kickstand still works for it, which is good. Just a Supermoto billet. I've got a catch can for the crankcase ventilation, or the power valve ventilation, and then also the crankcase ventilation for the transmission oil. In the air box, I have an overflow for the radiator. You can see my blue chain. This is a 15 and 40 in the rear. And it's an X-ring chain. I've got electron carburetor, a Boysen rad valve, an apex cylinder head with the XC dome, FMF fatty pipe, and just the power core. I got some skateboard wheels on the rear. I haven't quite got it set up for the front yet, but for the most part, that's it. Just got a set of Conti Attack SM Evos on it. And it's cold. This gearing is a little tall for first gear, but every motocross is going to be a little bit tall anyway. Floated it a little bit in first through third there. Again, I'm not trying to ravage this thing. There's no engine braking whatsoever, which is, if you're used to that, you got to simulate that with your rear brake. All right, I gave it a little bit of pull on it just because, but cornering is interesting. And obviously, tires don't like to work that great when they're cold and the asphalt is cold. It's pretty violent. It's pretty violent when that power valve kicks in. And it's a little jerky. It's just getting used to it. And again, I'm not really trusting these tires too much, but I'm told that with that apex cylinder head with the XC dome, I think that means for like cross-country riding, it's a little bit more forgiving for the over rev, and I don't think we're lacking any power for this weight. I've went through up to 5th gear in this, and it's just, I run out of room on this parking lot to really trust it. I'm going to talk about these wheels real quick. This is kind of, like I said, the first ride, and I'm wanting to go ahead and do the first spoke tightening. So I'm wanting to get some decent accelerations on it, but not like crazy hard like I've been doing, and some braking. I want to get some braking on that front tire, front wheel. And I just have the factory lines on this, but with the Warp 9 bracket, which is really cool. I've seen some really crappy ones. You actually bolt your rotor, or excuse me, your bolt your caliper. See, I'm starting to get cold. Bolt your caliper to the adapter and bolt the adapter to your normal mounting bolts for your fork. This thing's really fast. Now I've serviced the suspension on this too, and it feels pretty good. It's a little bit more rigid, but it's still divey in the front. Wow, the brakes are really strong. This is a fixed rotor, so it's not a floating. But it's got plenty of stopping power, and the rear brake it could be a little bit stronger. I'll probably need to bleed it, but I think one of the things that I want to do on this is probably get a set of braided lines on it. All right, so I'm in third there. So it's geared to go kind of a high speed, and I can change that. I just thought it'd be kind of funny to bring this thing onto the road course sometime. So I'm pulling in the clutch there just to try to save some of the RPMs a little bit on this engine, because only your oil is only being supplied to lubricate your piston and cylinder and rings when you got fuel going to it. So if you're giving it the throttle, that's fine, because you got fuel and obviously your oil going to it. And you don't have a bunch of, so if I pull in the clutch, the RPMs go down versus being, downshifting like you would on a 4-stroke, and you still have oil supply to it, and even though you're not supplying it with the fuel. I'm surprised just how linear this power is. I'm respecting it quite a bit, because I don't know what this is going to be like. I do have the weighted GYTR flywheel on this, so that does also help. It helps in a couple of ways, I think. We have greater amount of tighter turning mass with the heavier tire and wheel combination, even though it's not turning in it's turning in a tighter circle than the factory wheels. That's a 19, it's a motocross bike. That is just downright impressive. So I think I might ride this on the road course some. It's not really intending to be street legal. See how the RPMs, well, you probably don't hear it, but the RPMs rise when I let out that clutch and it's in a lower gear like that right there versus pulling in the clutch. This thing's pretty crazy. Clutch control is everything on getting it going. See, I'm going through a bunch of sand. You might notice that I'm being a little bit more tentative because, again, there's sand out here and the tires are cold. But my main goal is to get about 30 minutes of riding on this before I go in, and I'll let it just kind of hang out, and I'll do a spoke tightening on it. Just do some evaluations. Yeah, it comes up fast when that power valve comes out. That front end is so ridiculously light. It doesn't take much to screw up on a two-stroke. Again, there's quite a bit of sand out here. Yeah, some of the tight stuff and I noticed this when I was riding the KTM last year at OMC. You might have noticed that. Whew, the front end slid on me a little bit in that sand. That's why you got to be on your toes. I think this will be fun. My bars are slightly tweaked because one of the reasons why this bike's set mainly idly by has been because I crashed this thing at the motocross place. I was weighing about 210 pounds at the time. That's about what I weigh right now. And I decided not having much of a experience with it, I decided I was going to do some jumps, and a couple of them went great until they didn't. I got a little cross-rutted and still was staying on the gas, and I ended up over the handlebars because I got off the gas when I shouldn't have, and it's just, that stuff isn't for me. I still would like to do some trail riding, but I'll just do that with the E model. And I didn't want to give up on this bike. I didn't want to give up on it, and so I repurposed it. These wheels also go on, they will fit on my DRZ, excuse me, not my DRZ, my YZ400. Well, we call it YZ400, but it's actually a WR transmission 444 big bore monster. But these are a 4.25 inch rear wheel on this, which it means it's kind of made for a 150. You could put a 140, 70 on it, but you put a 150 on it and you got a lot of clearance. A 160 would probably be a disaster with a 5-inch wheel. Wow, when that power valve hits. Just got to watch it out for that. No, it seems like I'm kind of rambling on. Some of my criticisms, some of the people talk about how I talk and my speed. You got to remember, I'm a country guy, country boy. I'm not making excuses for myself, but that's just how I talk, man. But I try to keep up on it and provide some content that isn't completely worthless and filler. Wow, this thing is just crazy. I'm starting to get a little bit cool or cold. I know this is probably a bit redundant. just doing these same laps over and over again, but I got to keep it relatively simple. I'm not trying to do a bunch of wheelies out here and eat it the first time I'm really riding it and spending any time on it, because it was like 30 something when it went out the other day, and my battery was dead on my camera. And there, the rear end moved a little bit because I went through some sand. I'm just trying to be a little bit more cautious than anything, and just do the job at hand, and that is obviously break these wheels in per their procedure. So what they want us to do, or what we want us, how many people are in here? What they want you to do is to ride for about 30 minutes, tighten the spokes front and rear. And there's a certain pattern in which you tighten the spokes. You don't say, oh, this one's loose, and tighten it all in. I might have showed you somewhat of that on my DRZ fix-up series. But anyway, there's a certain pattern. I might even do that. I might even show you that on here. I might do that. But I've got, speaking of the devil, that DRZ fix-up series, the guy had it for about 3 days, literally 3 days. And then someone pulled out in front of him. They pulled out in front of him, and luckily we bled the brakes really good, and his bike, he did mostly an endo before it ejected him, and this person pulled out in front of him, and he went across the hood of the car, or somewhat vertically, and the handlebar area, so the cluster and everything hit the car at a much slower speed than what he would have been going if he tried to rely on the brakes that he had before. Anyway, I have that bike in the garage. I've bought some parts for it. One of them is the kill switch and the start switch, so the ignition switch, I guess you would say, and the key switch, of course. His cluster with his speedometer and everything is, I mean, the neutral light comes on, and that's about it at this point, because it got pretty crushed up and wrecked. Additionally, you know, we're going to look at the fork seals and everything, but it's not just a plug and play putting this ignition kill switch on it, because it's a 6-pin connector that's in there, and the replacement is a 9-pin connector. And the way I describe this is there's 6 pins plus one going around on the factory one on his bike. It's 6 pins, and then a 7th one is kind of a quick connect going around the outside. That is factory. I don't remember if that was a 07 or 08. I don't know why they did that. But what I have is a 9-pin connector, and that 7th wire is in that 9-pin connector, because there's only 7 of the 9 being utilized. So I got to switch the factory. I don't remember if it's female or male side on the factory cluster, and integrate that 7th wire, and then we'll be able to see if it's going to start, because it would not start, obviously, because it's broken. It would not actuate the starter, but even by forcing the starter to engage, it would not start. It would not try to start. So between the key switch and that ignition kill switch, excuse me, we get it starting and we'll go to phase 2. And I'm going to film that, because that bike just got to 30,000 miles. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at with that bike. And I think my thighs are freaking cold, because, like I said, it's 40 some odd degrees. My toes are starting to go numb. And I just wanted to share this first real ride, because it was just like not even 5 minutes when I rode the first time around. And it's probably a good thing my battery was dead. We didn't have this much light, and it was just a rushed thing. But anyway, I want to thank you for watching. and I'll see you next time.